I was 17 years old when my Uncle Morris looked me dead in the eye and told me I owed him for breathing his air. See, I just asked him about my inheritance, the money, the property, everything my daddy left behind in that will before the accident took him and Mama from this world. Morris stood in that kitchen in Richmond, Virginia, with his wife Claudette behind him, arms crossed, and he said, "Boy, you don't get nothing. You cost us too much already." Then he pointed at the door. That's when I learned that family ain't always blood, and blood ain't always family. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, you're going to feel every word of what I'm about to tell you. Before we go any further, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're watching from. These stories matter. Your story matters. And sometimes, knowing somebody else survived what broke them, well, that's what keeps us going. My name is Marcus Theodore Williams. I'm 74 years old now, living in a small house in North Carolina, where the morning light comes through pine trees like God himself is painting the day. But back in 1968, I was just a scared 10-year-old boy in Richmond, and I didn't know that the next 7 years would teach me more about pain, survival, and what a man is really made of than most people learn in a lifetime. This is that story. I remember the smell of Mama's cornbread on Sunday mornings. That's where this story really starts, not with the accident, but with the before. Because you got to understand what I lost to understand what they took from me later. We lived in a 2-story house on Westwood Avenue in Richmond's North Side, the kind of neighborhood where black folks were finally starting to own something real, something that said we mattered. Daddy, Jerome Williams, was a master carpenter who'd built half the staircases in the white folks' houses downtown and saved every penny to buy our home outright. Mama, Grace, taught piano lessons in our living room, and on Saturday afternoons you could hear children fumbling through Für Elises while she gently correct their hand positions. I was their only child, and they called me their miracle because Mama had 3 miscarriages before I came along. She used to hold my face in her hands and say, "Marcus, you were worth the wait." I believed I was the luckiest boy in Virginia. Daddy's brother Morris was around back then, but not often. He'd show up at Thanksgiving or Christmas, always with his hand out and a hard luck story about his construction business going under, or Claudette needing surgery, or the car breaking down. Daddy would slip him money, never in front of Mama because she didn't approve, and Morris would disappear again for months. I remember one Christmas when I was 9, Morris came by drunk, stumbling through our front door talking loud about how Daddy thought he was better than everybody. "You got this house? You got that fancy workshop? You walking around here like you some kind of king," Morris slurred, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. Daddy just put his hand on Morris' shoulder and said, "Brother, you're always welcome here. Always." That's the kind of man my father was. He believed in second chances, even for people who'd burned through their first 10. I didn't know then that belief would cost me everything. The accident happened on a Tuesday in March 1968. Daddy had taken Mama to Norfolk to visit her sister who just had a baby. They were driving back on Route 460, and the roads were slick from an afternoon rain. A semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the center line right into their path. The Virginia State Police said they died instantly. Quick, no suffering. I was at school when Principal Henderson called me into his office. I remember his face, how he couldn't look me in the eyes, how his hands shook when he told me there'd been an accident. Mrs. Patterson from next door came to get me, and I knew from the way she was crying before she even said a word. They let me see them at the funeral home. Daddy's face was peaceful, like he was sleeping. Mama's hand was cold when I touched it. I was 10 years old, and the world stopped making sense that day. After the funeral, I stayed with Mrs. Patterson for a week while the adults figured out what to do with me. I could hear them talking late at night, lawyers, church folks, distant cousins I'd never met. Daddy had a will. He'd been smart about that, meticulous even. Everything was supposed to go into a trust for me until I turned 18. The house, his workshop and tools, his life insurance policy, and a savings account with nearly $40,000, a fortune in 1968 for a black family. The lawyer, Mr. Pemberton, explained it to me in simple terms. Son, your father made sure you'd be taken care of. When you turn 18, everything becomes yours. But until then, I needed a guardian. I didn't have grandparents left on either side. Mama was an only child except for that sister in Norfolk who already had 6 kids in a 3-bedroom house. That left Daddy's brother Morris. He was the only option, or so they said. Morris and Claudette came to pick me up on a Sunday afternoon. I remember packing my clothes into 2 suitcases, looking around the house one last time. Mama's piano sat silent in the living room. Daddy's workshop out back was locked up tight, his tools hanging on the pegboard like they were waiting for him to come home. Morris walked through the house like he was taking inventory, touching things, opening drawers. This is all going to be taken care of, he said to Mr. Pemberton, who was there to supervise the handover. The boy's family now. We'll raise him right. Claudette stood in the doorway, wearing a forced smile that never reached her eyes. As we drove away from Westwood Avenue, I looked back through the rear window and watched my whole world shrink into the distance. Morris caught me looking in the rearview mirror. Boy, you better get used to your new life, he said. That old life? That's over. In the back seat, with my suitcases at my feet and my parents' funeral program clutched in my hand, I didn't know how right he was. I didn't know that the next 7 years would be a different kind of death, the slow kind, where they kill you piece by piece, day by day, until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Morris and Claudette lived in a rental house in South Richmond, a narrow shotgun-style place on Decatur Street where the paint was peeling and the front steps sagged under your weight. It was nothing like my home on Westwood Avenue. Their house smelled like cigarette smoke and fried food, and there was always a tension in the air, like a storm was building but never quite breaking. They had 2 kids of their own, Dwayne, who was 13 and built like a linebacker even then, and Sheila, who was 8 and had Claudette's mean eyes. From day one, they made it clear I wasn't one of them. Claudette showed me to a small room at the back of the house, barely bigger than a closet, with a twin mattress on the floor and a window that didn't open. This is yours, she said, dropping my suitcases inside. We don't have much, so you better be grateful. I nodded, not knowing what else to do. That night, I lay on that mattress and cried so hard I thought I might throw up. I could hear them in the living room, their voices carrying through the thin walls, already complaining about the extra mouth to feed. The first few months, they put on a show. When Mr. Pemberton would call to check on me, Morris would put his hand on my shoulder and say, Marcus is doing just fine. He's part of the family. But the second that lawyer hung up the phone, the masks came off. Claudette started assigning me chores that Dwayne and Sheila never had to do. I woke up at 5:30 every morning to start breakfast, wash dishes, sweep floors, take out trash. If I didn't do it exactly how she wanted, she'd make me do it again, sometimes 3 or 4 times. Your daddy might have spoiled you, but I won't, she'd say, standing over me while I remopped the kitchen floor because she found a spot I'd missed. Dwayne would laugh, leaning in the doorway eating a bowl of cereal that I'd made for him. Sheila learned quick that she could get me in trouble for anything. She'd break something and blame me, steal food and say I ate it. Morris never questioned them. He'd just take off his belt and tell me to pull up my shirt. The first time he hit me, I was so shocked I didn't even cry. The 10th time, I'd learned not to. School became my escape, the only place where I could breathe. I was in 5th grade at George Mason Elementary, and my teacher, Mrs. Robinson, was a light in that darkness. She noticed things. How I'd come to school tired, how I'd wolf down the free lunch like I hadn't eaten breakfast, how I'd flinch when someone moved too fast near me. One day she kept me after class and asked if everything was okay at home. I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell her everything. But Morris had warned me. If you tell anybody our business, if you make us look bad, I'll make sure you regret it. Nobody's going to believe you anyway. We're doing you a favor. So I lied to Mrs. Robinson. I said everything was fine. I was just adjusting. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But what could she do? This was 1968. People didn't call Child Protective Services over a few chores and some discipline. Black families handled their business privately. So Mrs. Robinson did what she could. She'd slip me extra snacks, let me stay late to help with cleaning the classroom, recommended me for after-school programs. She was trying to save me in the only way she knew how. The inheritance, Daddy's house, his money, his legacy, hung over everything like a ghost. Morris never mentioned it directly, but I'd catch him and Claudette talking late at night, their voices low and urgent. "That house on Westwood is just sitting there," Claudette would say, "empty, while we're crammed in here." Morris would respond, "The will says it stays in trust until he's 18. Pemberton's watching it like a hawk. Then we sell it, use the money for his upbringing. That's legal, isn't it?" There'd be a pause. "I'll talk to Pemberton." But Mr. Pemberton must have said no because the house stayed empty, locked up tight. Morris started renting it out when I was 12. I found out years later, and keeping all the rental income for himself. He told the lawyer it was going toward my expenses, but I never saw a dime. My clothes came from Goodwill. My school supplies came from Mrs. Robinson's personal stash. The only time Morris spent money on me was when Mr. Pemberton or church people were around, and then it was all for show. He'd buy me one new shirt, make a production of it, talk about what a burden but also a blessing I was. The church folks would nod approvingly, never seeing what happened when the doors closed. By the time I turned 13, something inside me had calcified, turned hard. I stopped crying. I stopped expecting anything good. I became a ghost in that house, moving through my chores, going to school, coming home, eating dinner in silence while Dwayne and Sheila got seconds and I got whatever was left. Morris's drinking got worse. He'd lost another job, his third since I'd moved in. And he'd come home angry, looking for someone to take it out on. That someone was usually me. One night, I made the mistake of asking him about my daddy's tools. "What happened to the workshop?" I asked. "Daddy's carpentry tools. Where are they?" Morris went so still that I knew I'd made a mistake. He stood up slowly from his chair, and I could see Claudette's face go tight. "You think you're going to be a carpenter like Jerome?" Morris said, his voice cold. "You think you're special?" "No, sir. You ain't nothing," he said. "You hear me? Your daddy was a fool who worked himself to death for pennies, and you're a fool if you think you're any different. Those tools are sold. Gone. And when you turn 18, we'll see about the rest." That's when I knew for sure they were never going to let me have what was mine. They'd been planning this from the beginning. 15 years old, and I'd grown tall, 6 feet already, with my daddy's broad shoulders and my mama's serious eyes. People at school started saying I looked like I could play basketball, but Morris and Claudette wouldn't let me join any teams. "You got responsibilities at home," Claudette would say. What she meant was, "You're free labor, and we're not losing that." By this point, I was doing almost everything around the house. I cooked most meals. I cleaned every room. I fixed things when they broke, learned plumbing from a library book when the toilet wouldn't stop running, had taught myself basic electrical work when outlets stopped working. Morris would watch me fix something and grunt, "At least you're good for something." I'd learned not to respond. Words were dangerous in that house. Silence was survival. But inside, I was counting down. 3 more years until I turned 18. 3 more years until I could claim my inheritance, walk out of this house, and never look back. I held on to that thought like a life raft in a flood. That's the year I met Mr. Gerald Patterson. No relation to Mrs. Patterson, who'd been our neighbor. He was the new guidance counselor at Armstrong High School, where I'd transferred for 9th grade. Mr. Patterson was a veteran, had served in Korea, and he had a way of seeing through the walls people built. He called me into his office one day in October. "Marcus Williams," he said, looking at my file. "Straight A's. Teachers say you're one of the smartest kids they've taught, but you're not in any clubs, no sports, no activities. Why is that?" I gave him the practiced answer. I helped my uncle with his business after school. It wasn't completely a lie. Morris had started a handyman business that mostly consisted of him taking jobs and making me do the work while he collected the money. Mr. Patterson leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Son, I was a foster kid myself," he said. "I know what it looks like when someone's just surviving instead of living. If you ever need to talk, my door's open." I nodded, thanked him, and left. But something about that conversation stuck with me. He saw me. Really saw me. That was rare. The stealing became more obvious as I got older. Morris had convinced Mr. Pemberton to let him manage the trust, claiming it would be easier to handle expenses. The lawyer was old by then, probably didn't want the hassle, so he agreed with certain restrictions. But Morris found ways around everything. The house on Westwood, my house, had been rented out for years, but Morris claimed the rental income barely covered maintenance and taxes. When I asked to see the statements, he laughed in my face. "You questioning me, boy? After everything we've done for you?" Claudette chimed in. "We could have put you in foster care. You'd be in some group home right now if it wasn't for us. Show some damn gratitude." Dwayne, who was 19 by then and still living at home, added his 2 cents. "Yeah, you owe us, big time." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Morris by his collar and demand the truth. But I was still a minor. I had no power, no voice, no proof. So I swallowed my anger and started planning. I found the number from Mr. Pemberton's office and called from a payphone at school. His secretary said he'd retired, and the practice had been taken over by his son, Richard Pemberton, Jr. I made an appointment. Richard Pemberton, Jr. met me on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I'd told Morris and Claudette I had chess club, a lie since I wasn't in chess club, but they didn't care enough to verify. Mr. Pemberton's office was in downtown Richmond, in a building with marble floors and portraits of lawyers on the walls. He was younger than his father, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes and a crisp suit. I sat across from him and told him everything: the chores, the treatment, Morris claiming expenses but never showing proof, the rental income I'd never seen. Mr. Pemberton listened without interrupting. When I finished, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a file. "Marcus, I've been reviewing your trust since taking over my father's cases," he said, "and I've had some concerns." He showed me papers, rental agreements for the Westwood house showing Morris collecting $300 a month but only reporting $100 to the trust. Receipts for Marcus's expenses that included car payments for a Cadillac I'd never ridden in and restaurant bills at places I'd never eaten. "This is fraud," Mr. Pemberton said flatly. "Your uncle has been stealing from your inheritance for years." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "How much?" I asked. Pemberton did some quick calculations. Conservatively, between the unreported rental income, the false expense claims, and the interest you should have earned, probably $20,000. And that's not counting your father's tools and equipment, which were inventoried in the estate, but are now listed as sold for Marcus's benefit, with no record of where that money went. $20,000. That was half my inheritance, stolen over 5 years by the people who were supposed to be taking care of me. I must have looked sick because Mr. Pemberton poured me a glass of water. "What can we do?" I asked. He leaned forward. "Legally, we can pursue this, but it'll take time and you're still a minor under Morris's guardianship. If we move now, he could make your life much harder. My advice? Wait until you're 18. The day you turn 18, you're no longer under his control. Lazos will file for a full accounting of the trust, demand repayment, and remove him as trustee. Can you wait 2 more years?" I thought about those 2 more years in that house, knowing what I knew now, watching them spend my inheritance on themselves. But what choice did I have? "I'll wait," I said. Mr. Pemberton nodded. "Don't tell them you came here. Don't give them any warning. The element of surprise is the only advantage we have." I left his office and walked back to that house on Decatur Street, carrying a rage so pure it scared me. 16 brought a growth spurt and a deepening voice, and it also brought something else: awareness. I'd spent 6 years surviving day by day, but now I was thinking about the future. Mr. Patterson checked in with me regularly, and through our conversations, I learned about college, scholarships, ways to build a life beyond Richmond. "You're smart enough for any university in this country," he told me, "but you need to start preparing now. SAT prep, college essays, recommendations." I threw myself into school with a fury. I stayed late in the library, studying until the janitors kicked me out. My grades went from straight A's to straight A pluses. Teachers noticed. Mrs. Chen, my math teacher, recommended me for an advanced placement program. Coach Morris, different Morris, thankfully, tried again to recruit me for basketball, and this time I found a way. I told Claudette that basketball would look good on college applications, Might help me get a scholarship and get out of their house sooner. That last part convinced her. Fine, she said, but your chores better still get done. I'd wake up at 4:30 in the morning to do housework before school, stay for basketball practice until 6, then study until midnight. I was exhausted every single day, but I was building something, an escape plan. That winter, Morris lost another job. He'd been working as a site supervisor for a construction company, but he got fired for showing up drunk. The money got tighter, which meant the anger got worse. He'd always been a mean drunk, but now he was a broke, mean drunk, which is a special kind of dangerous. One night in January, he came home and found that I'd made pork chops for dinner, but they were slightly overdone. He picked up the plate and threw it against the wall. The ceramic shattering, grease splattering across the wallpaper Claudette had just hung. "You can't even cook right," he screamed. "You useless piece of—" He came at me with his fist cocked back. But I was 6'2" now, 180 pounds, and I'd spent months doing push-ups in my room, building strength. When he swung, I caught his wrist. We stood there frozen, his fist in my hand, both of us shocked. I'd never fought back before, ever. The room went silent. Dwayne stood up from the couch. Claudette gasped. I let go of Morris's wrist and stepped back, my heart hammering. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, the words reflexive after years of conditioning. But something had shifted. Morris saw it too. The power dynamic was changing. After that night, they started talking differently around me, quieter, more careful. I'd hear them late at night in their bedroom. "He's getting too big. We just need to hold out 2 more years. What if he tries to take everything? He won't. He doesn't have the spine." But they were wrong about that last part. I had spine now. I'd grown one out of necessity, built it out of survival, and I was keeping secrets of my own. Mr. Pemberton and I had been meeting regularly, always discreetly, always at his office, always with me making sure Morris and Claudette didn't know. We were building a case, documenting everything, the rental income discrepancies, the false expense reports, the missing tools. Mr. Pemberton had even found that Morris had taken out a second mortgage on the Westwood house, my house, without proper authorization, using it as collateral for a business loan that he defaulted on. "This is criminal," Mr. Pemberton said. "When you turn 18, we're not just asking for your inheritance back. We're talking about pressing charges." The thought of Morris in handcuffs made something savage in me smile. Spring of my junior year, I met Lisa Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter, who was a senior. She was beautiful and smart, headed to Virginia State University on a full scholarship. We started dating, if you could call it that. Mostly, we'd study together in the library, talk about getting out of Richmond, dream about futures that didn't include poverty and pain. Lisa was the first person outside of Mr. Patterson who I told about my situation. We were sitting on a bench in Monroe Park one Saturday afternoon in April, and it just came out, all of it. The accident, Morris and Claudette, the stolen inheritance, the counting down until I turned 18. When I finished, Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Marcus, you're going to make it out. I know you are. And when you do, you're going to help other kids like you. You have to promise me that." I promised her. I meant it. But at that moment, I didn't know how hard keeping that promise would be. I didn't know that things were about to get so much worse before they got better. The explosion came on a Saturday in June, 2 weeks before my 17th birthday. I came home from basketball practice to find Morris in the kitchen, drunk and rifling through papers. He'd found something. I never learned what exactly. Maybe a letter from Mr. Pemberton, maybe notes I'd been careless about hiding. "You little snake," he said when I walked in. "You've been talking to lawyers after everything we've done for you?" I didn't run. I should have, but I didn't. I stood there and finally said what I'd been thinking for 7 years. "You stole from me. You've been stealing from me since I got here." His face went purple. Claudette came running from the bedroom. Dwayne appeared from somewhere. "You ungrateful." Morris started, but I cut him off. "The house on Westwood, Daddy's savings, the life insurance, the tools, all of it. You took it all and gave me nothing but chores and beatings and lies." I was shaking, but I kept going. "I know about the second mortgage. I know about the rental income you've been pocketing. I know everything. And when I turn 18, I'm taking back what's mine, and you're going to pay for what you did." The silence that followed was so heavy I could barely breathe. Then Morris smiled, and it was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. "Boy," he said softly, "you ain't living to see 18. And I realized right then I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. That night, everything fell apart. Morris grabbed me by my shirt and slammed me against the refrigerator so hard that magnets went flying, pictures of Dwayne and Sheila scattering across the floor. "You think you're smart?" he snarled, his breath hot and reeking of whiskey. "You think you can threaten me? In my house?" Claudette was screaming something, Dwayne was yelling, and Sheila had run to her room. I tried to push Morris off, but he had age and rage on his side. He punched me in the stomach, drove the air from my lungs, dropped me to my knees. I was gasping, trying to breathe, when I heard Claudette say, "Morris, stop! You're going to kill him." And Morris said, "I will never forget this as long as I live. Good, save us the trouble." That's when I knew I had to run. I stumbled to my feet, dodged another swing, and crashed through the screen door into the backyard. I didn't stop running until I was 6 blocks away, my lungs burning, my stomach aching, my mind racing. I had nowhere to go, no money, no phone. I was 17 years old and suddenly, terrifyingly homeless. I ended up at Monroe Park that night, sleeping on a bench with my jacket as a pillow and my arms wrapped around myself against the June night chill. Every sound made me jump. Footsteps, car doors, voices. I thought Morris might come looking for me, might finish what he'd started. At some point I must have fallen asleep because I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder. It was a police officer, young guy, black like me. "Son, you can't sleep here," he said, not unkindly. "Where are your parents?" "Dead," I said, the word automatic. "Where are you staying?" I didn't answer. What could I say? The officer studied me, saw the bruise forming on my cheek, the way I was holding my ribs. "You in trouble at home?" he asked. I wanted to tell him everything, but I remembered Morris's warnings, remembered how the system worked in 1969, remembered that I was so close, just one more year until 18. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just needed some air. I'll go home now." The officer didn't believe me, but what could he do? He waited until I stood up and started walking before he drove away. I walked in circles for 2 hours, watching the sun come up over Richmond, trying to figure out what to do next. I showed up at Mr. Patterson's house that Sunday morning. I didn't know where else to go. He lived in a small ranch house in Highland Park, and when he opened the door in his bathrobe and saw me standing there bruised and exhausted, his face went through about 5 emotions before landing on determination. "Get inside," he said. His wife, Angela, made me breakfast while Mr. Patterson made phone calls. "We need to get you into emergency foster care," he said. "What your uncle did is assault. We file a police report, get you placed somewhere safe, accelerate the emancipation process." But I knew how that would go. Court proceedings. Investigations. Morris would lie. Claudette would back him up. They'd make me look like a troubled teen who was stealing from them. And even if I won, which wasn't guaranteed, it could take months, years even. Meanwhile, Morris would have time to hide money, sell the house, destroy records. "No," I said. "I can't risk it. I just need to survive until I turn 18. That's 11 months. I can make it 11 months. Mr. Patterson looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I'd already lost so much. I couldn't risk losing the inheritance too. For the next 3 weeks, I lived in a weird limbo. Mr. Patterson let me sleep in his guest room, fed me, gave me space. But he made it clear it was temporary. He could lose his job for housing a student, especially without going through proper channels. "I'll give you until end of summer," he said. "That's it. Then we have to file official reports." During the day, I'd go to school, my junior year was ending, and try to act normal. Morris had called the school, claimed I'd run away, that he was worried sick. I told the counselors I was staying with a friend's family, that everything was fine. Nobody pushed too hard. In that era, if a kid was clean, fed, and showing up to class, authorities didn't ask too many questions. I avoided Dwayne in the hallways. I kept my head down. And at night, lying in Mr. Patterson's guest room, I made plans. I needed money. I needed independence. I needed to survive the next 11 months without Morris finding me, without the system catching me, without losing everything I'd fought for. The answer came from an unexpected place. Mr. Chen, Lisa's father, who owned a restaurant in Church Hill. Lisa had told her parents about me. Not everything, but enough. Mr. Chen called Mr. Patterson's house one evening and asked to speak to me. Lisa says you need work, he said in his heavy accent. I need dishwasher, night shift, 5 nights a week, cash pay. You interested? It was a lifeline thrown from a boat into dark water, and I grabbed it. Yes, sir, I said. When can I start? That next Monday, I started working at Golden Dragon Restaurant from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., washing dishes in a steaming kitchen while the dinner rush happened on the other side of the wall. Mr. Chen paid me under the table, $5 an hour, which was good money for a kid my age in 1969. I worked 5 nights a week, sometimes 6. I slept at Mr. Patterson's house until the end of August, when I found a room in a boarding house on Lee Street that rented weekly to anybody with cash and no questions asked. The room was tiny, the walls were thin, and I shared a bathroom with 6 other people, but it was mine. My space, my freedom. I was 17 years old, living alone, working full-time, still going to school, and counting down the days until I turned 18 and could finally reclaim what was mine. What I didn't know was that Morris wasn't done with me. Not even close. The worst was still coming. That fall of 1969, I learned what it meant to be a man before I was ready. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. in that boarding house room on Lee Street, shower in the communal bathroom that always smelled like mildew and cheap soap, and walk 40 minutes to Armstrong High School because I couldn't afford the bus most days. I'd go to classes running on 3 hours of sleep, my hands raw from washing dishes the night before, my body aching in places 17-year-olds shouldn't ache. Teachers who'd once praised my work started giving me concerned looks. My grades slipped from A's to B's. I'd fall asleep in history class, wake up to find Mr. Henderson standing over my desk, shaking his head. Marcus, what's going on with you? He'd ask. And I'd lie, always lie. Just tired, sir, working a part-time job. I couldn't tell him I was working 45 hours a week while trying to finish high school. Couldn't tell him I was eating 1 meal a day because that's all I could afford after paying rent. Couldn't tell him that some nights at Golden Dragon I'd cry over the industrial sink while scrubbing burnt rice off wucks, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. Morris found me in October. I don't know how. Maybe someone from the neighborhood saw me. Maybe Dwayne followed me from school one day. But he found me. I was walking out of Golden Dragon at 2:30 in the morning, exhausted and smelling like grease and dish soap, when a car pulled up beside me. Morris's Cadillac, the one he'd bought with my inheritance money. He rolled down the window, and I could see Claudette in the passenger seat. Boy, you look like hell, Morris said, almost cheerful. I kept walking. He drove alongside me, slow, matching my pace. You really think you're going to make it out here alone? You're going to fail, Marcus. You're going to end up dead in some alley, and nobody's going to care. I stopped walking and turned to face him. What do you want? I asked. His smile disappeared. I want you to come home. Stop this foolishness. You drop this lawyer nonsense. You come back. We forget this ever happened. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The audacity. And let you keep stealing from me? Let you sell everything my daddy worked for? Morris's jaw tightened. That money ain't yours. You don't deserve it. Your daddy was my brother, and he would have wanted me to have it. I'm family. You're just a... He caught himself before he said it, but I heard it anyway in the silence. You're just a burden, just an orphan, just nothing. The harassment started that week. Morris would show up outside Golden Dragon, sitting in his car, watching me work through the window. He'd follow me home some nights, driving slowly behind me, never doing anything actionable, but making his presence known. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. I started taking different routes home, varying my schedule, looking over my shoulder constantly. Mr. Chen noticed. That man in the Cadillac, he said one night. He bother you? I nodded. My uncle. He's not happy I left. Mr. Chen's face darkened. He come in my restaurant, I call police. You understand? You safe here. I thanked him, but we both knew the police wouldn't do anything. Morris hadn't technically done anything illegal, just happened to be in the same places as me, just exercising his right to drive on public streets. Then in early November, the threats escalated. I came back to my boarding house room to find my door kicked in, my few belongings scattered across the floor. Someone had torn through everything, broken my radio, slashed the mattress, spray-painted words on the wall I won't repeat. Mrs. Kowalski, the landlady, found me standing in the doorway, staring at the destruction. "You bring trouble here," she said. "You got 1 week to leave." I didn't have to ask who did it. I knew. That's when Mr. Pemberton dropped his own bomb. I met him at his office on a Wednesday afternoon in November, and his face told me something was wrong before he even opened his mouth. "Marcus, sit down," he said. I sat. I'd been going through the trust documents more carefully, and I found something disturbing. The Westwood house, your house, Morris has it listed for sale. My stomach dropped. He can't do that. It's in trust. You said, he got a judge to approve it. Judge Harold Baxter, who happens to be Morris's poker buddy. The petition claimed the house was a depreciating asset and that selling it would be in the minor's best interest. Morris claimed he'd put the proceeds in the trust, but Mr. Pemberton handed me a document. The sale closed 3 weeks ago, $35,000. I've requested an accounting of where that money went, but Morris's lawyer is stonewalling. I couldn't breathe. The house, my childhood home, the place where Mama taught piano and Daddy built his dreams. Sold. Gone. And the money was probably already spent, already disappeared into Morris's pockets. "Can we stop this?" I asked, hearing my voice crack. Mr. Pemberton's silence was answer enough. I walked out of that office and into the November cold, and something broke inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap, like a branch under too much weight. I found myself at Monroe Park, sitting on the same bench where I'd slept that night in June. I thought about my parents, wondered what they'd think of me now, wondered if they'd be disappointed that I'd let this happen, that I'd been too weak to protect what they'd left me. The rage I'd been carrying all these years shifted into something else, something darker and more dangerous. Despair. I thought about just disappearing, leaving Richmond, hitchhiking west, starting over somewhere with a fake name and no history. Who cared about the inheritance anymore? Most of it was gone anyway. But then I remembered Mrs. Patterson, who'd cried at my parents' funeral, Mr. Patterson, who'd risked his job to help me, Mr. Chin, who'd given me work when I had nothing, Lisa, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And I thought about Morris, sitting in that Cadillac he'd bought with my money, smiling because he thought he'd won. No, I wasn't going to let him win. If I had to fight for every dollar, if I had to drag him through court for years, if I had to spend the rest of my life making him pay for what he'd done, I would. I stood up from that bench, and I swore on my parents' graves, Morris was going to answer for this. All of it. December came with an early cold snap that froze Richmond solid. I'd moved into a different boarding house on after the break-in, this one even cheaper and rougher than the last. My room had a space heater that barely worked, and some mornings I'd wake up seeing my breath in the air. I got sick right before Christmas, some kind of flu that left me feverish and weak. I missed 3 days of work at Golden Dragon, 3 days I couldn't afford to miss. When I finally dragged myself back, Mr. Chin took one look at me and sent me home. "You spread germs to customers," he said. "Come back when you're better." I understood the business logic, but those lost shifts meant I couldn't pay rent on time. Mrs. Washington, my new landlady, wasn't as patient as Mrs. Kowalski had been. "You late again. You're out," she said. "I don't care you're sick. Life don't care you're sick." She was right about that. Life didn't care. I spent Christmas Day alone in that freezing room, too sick to work, too proud to ask for help, listening to families in other rooms celebrating while I shivered under a thin blanket and counted the days until my 18th birthday. March 15th, 1970. 82 days away. School became impossible to maintain. I was missing too many classes, falling too far behind. In January, Mr. Henderson called me into his office. "Marcus, you're failing 3 classes. At this rate, you won't graduate." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not graduating high school meant no college, no future beyond washing dishes. It meant Morris had won in a different way. He'd stolen my inheritance and my education, taken everything my parents had wanted from me. "I'm working full time," I finally admitted. "I have to. I'm on my own." Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, and I saw something like pity cross his face. Pity I didn't want, couldn't afford. "There are programs," he started, Social services, youth shelters. No, I cut him off. I'm 17. In 2 months, I'm 18. I just need to make it 2 more months. He studied me for a long moment. What happens when you turn 18? I couldn't tell him about the inheritance, about the legal battle Mr. Pemberton was preparing. I get access to resources, I said carefully. Trust me, I just need to hold on a little longer. Mr. Henderson sighed. I'll talk to your teachers, see if we can work out some kind of arrangement, makeup work, after-school tutoring. But Marcus, you have to show up. You have to try. I promised I would. It was a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Then in late January, disaster struck. I was walking home from Golden Dragon at 3 a.m. when 2 men jumped me in an alley off Broad Street. I never saw their faces. They wore masks, moved fast. One grabbed me from behind while the other went through my pockets, taking the cash I'd just earned, $43, my entire week's pay. When I struggled, one of them punched me in the face, broke my nose, left me bleeding on the cold pavement. They ran off, and I lay there for I don't know how long, tasting blood, my head ringing. A homeless man named Curtis found me, helped me to my feet, walked me to the emergency room at MCV Hospital. The doctors set my nose, gave me pain pills I couldn't afford to fill the prescription for, and sent me home with a bill I'd never be able to pay. Curtis, bless him, walked me back to the boarding house. Richmond's getting dangerous, he said. You gotta be more careful, young blood. But lying in bed that night, my face throbbing, my savings gone, I realized something. Those men knew where I worked, knew what time I got off. One of them had called me by name, Marcus, before they ran. This wasn't random. Morris had sent them. Or Dwayne. Someone who wanted to break me, wanted to remind me I was vulnerable and alone. I thought I had time. I thought I could just survive until March, until my birthday, until I could claim what was mine and escape this nightmare. But Morris was moving faster than I knew. In February, Mr. Pemberton called me with news that made my blood run cold. Marcus, Morris has petitioned the court to extend his guardianship beyond your 18th birthday. He's claiming you're mentally unstable, that you ran away from home, that you're engaging in self-destructive behavior. He has statements from Claudette and Dwayne supporting this claim. My hands went numb. Can he do that? In Virginia in 1970? Yes, under certain circumstances. If a judge agrees you're incompetent, your guardianship could be extended until you're 21, and Morris would maintain control of your trust. 3 more years. 3 more years of Morris stealing, lying, controlling my life. We'll fight it, Mr. Pemberton said. I'll need you to submit to a psychological evaluation, prove you're competent. But Marcus, you need to understand, this is what Morris has been planning. He's been setting this up, creating a paper trail. The police report Claudette filed claiming you stole from them before you left. The school attendance record showing you're failing. The hospital visit with injuries. He's painting a picture of an unstable, troubled youth. I felt the walls closing in. Morris wasn't just stealing my money. He was trying to steal my freedom, my autonomy, my entire future. That night, I sat in my room and wrote everything down, every detail, every theft, every beating, every lie. I filled 10 pages front and back, my hand cramping, my broken nose throbbing. If Morris wanted to paint me as crazy, I'd document everything to prove I wasn't. Prove that I was surviving despite impossible odds, that I was still going to school despite working nights, that I was fighting for something real. When I finished, I folded the pages and put them in an envelope addressed to Mr. Pemberton. Then I wrote a second letter, this one to my parents. I don't know why. They'd been dead for almost 9 years. But I needed to tell them I was trying. Needed to tell them I hadn't forgotten the lessons they'd taught me, the values they'd instilled. I'm not giving up, I wrote, even when it hurts, even when it feels impossible. I'm not giving up because you didn't raise a quitter. You raised a fighter. I never mailed that second letter. I kept it, folded in my wallet, as a reminder. My 18th birthday was 37 days away. 37 days until freedom. 37 days until the real war began. I'd survived this long on stubbornness and spite. I could survive 37 more days. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Morris was planning something else. Something that would push me to the absolute edge, force me to decide once and for all, was I my father's son, or was I going to let the wolves win? March came in like the lion they always talk about. Cold rain that turned Richmond streets into rivers of gray slush. I was counting down 14 days, 13 days, 12 days until my 18th birthday. But my body was giving out. The flu I'd had in December had never fully gone away, just lingered in my chest, making me cough until my ribs ached. I wasn't eating enough. Couldn't afford to, really. I'd lost 30 pounds since June, my clothes hanging off my frame, my face gaunt when I caught my reflection in store windows. Mr. Chen noticed. "You look like Ghost," he said one night at the restaurant. "When's the last time you had real meal?" I couldn't remember. He brought me a plate of lo mein and orange chicken, watched until I finished every bite. "You take tomorrow off," he said. "Rest. I pay you anyway." I wanted to argue but didn't have the strength. The kindness broke something in me. I went to the restaurant bathroom and cried, deep shaking sobs I'd been holding back for months. When I came out, Mr. Chen pretended not to notice my red eyes. Some acts of grace are best received in silence. The psychological evaluation happened on March 8th, exactly 1 week before my birthday. Dr. Helen Morrison was a clinical psychologist in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She interviewed me for 3 hours in her office in the Fan District, asking questions about my childhood, my parents' death, my relationship with Morris and Claudette, my current living situation. I answered honestly, mostly. I downplayed how bad things were, didn't mention sleeping some nights at the restaurant because I couldn't afford rent, didn't talk about the men who jumped me, or how some mornings I was so dizzy from hunger I had to sit down before I fell down. I needed her to write that I was competent, stable, capable of managing my own affairs. If she saw how close I was to breaking, she might side with Morris. At the end of the session, Dr. Morrison set down her notepad and looked at me. "Marcus, I want you to know, what you've survived would destroy most adults, let alone a 17-year-old. The fact that you're still in school, still working, still fighting, that shows remarkable resilience." She paused. "But you can't keep going like this. You're running on empty. When this guardianship issue is resolved, I want you to consider counseling. You've been through trauma, and you deserve help processing it." I nodded, thanked her, left. Help felt like a luxury I couldn't afford yet. 3 days before my birthday, Morris made his final move. I came back to my boarding house to find Mrs. Washington waiting in the hallway, her face apologetic but firm. "Your uncle was here," she said. "Paid me 3 months back rent you supposedly owe. Said he's your guardian, said you ran away, said he's taking responsibility for you." My heart stopped. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you're a good kid, that you pay on time, that I don't get involved in family business." She handed me an envelope. He left this. Inside was a letter typed on lawyer's letterhead. It informed me that Judge Baxter had granted an emergency extension of Morris's guardianship due to concerns about the minor's welfare. The letter stated that I was to return to Morris's custody immediately, that failure to do so would result in my arrest for violating a court order. It was dated March 10th, 1970. My birthday was March 15th. Morris had gotten a judge, his poker buddy, to extend his control for 5 more days, just long enough to reach my birthday, at which point he tried to extend it further. I called Mr. Pemberton from a payphone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. "This can't be legal," I said. Mr. Pemberton's voice was tight. "It's not. It's a corrupt judge making a corrupt ruling. But challenging it will take time, time you don't have." I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I worked my shifts at Golden Dragon in a haze, jumping every time the door opened, expecting to see police coming to drag me back to Morris's house. Mr. Chen saw my fear. "You in trouble?" he asked. I told him everything, the whole story, start to finish, the inheritance, the theft, Morris's attempts to extend guardianship, the corrupt judge. When I finished, Mr. Chen was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My family, we come from China during war. We know what it means when government doesn't protect you, when powerful people make rules to hurt you. You need safe place until birthday?" I nodded, unable to speak. "You stay here," he said, gesturing to the restaurant. "Storage room in back has cot. You sleep here until you're 18, until this is finished. Nobody knows. Not even my wife, just you, me, and Lisa. That night, I moved my few possessions into a storage room that smelled like soy sauce and sesame oil, surrounded by industrial-sized containers of rice and dried noodles. It wasn't dignity, but it was safety. And for 3 days, that's all I needed. March 14th, 1970, the day before my 18th birthday. I woke up on that cot in the storage room at Golden Dragon, my body aching, my mind exhausted but strangely clear. I'd made it. Against everything. The beatings, the theft, the hunger, the fear, the corrupt judges and violent men. I'd made it to the edge of freedom. One more day. 24 more hours. Then I'd be legally an adult, beyond Morris's control, able to pursue justice for everything he'd stolen. I spent that day in the storage room, resting for the first time in months. Lisa brought me food, real food, a feast her mother had prepared. Egg rolls, fried rice, sweet and sour pork, almond cookies. "Tomorrow you fight," Lisa said. "Today you eat." That evening, Mr. Pemberton called the restaurant's phone. "Marcus, everything's ready. The moment it's past midnight and you're 18, we file. Full accounting of the trust, charges of fraud, embezzlement, possibly assault. I've documented everything." His voice held something I hadn't heard before. Confidence. "We're going to win this." I wanted to believe him. I'd spent so long just surviving that the concept of winning felt foreign, impossible. But lying on that cot that night, listening to the sounds of the restaurant closing down, I let myself imagine it. Imagine Morris's face when he realized he'd lost. Imagine having my own place, finishing school, maybe even going to college like my parents wanted. Imagine being free. At 11:47 p.m., I stopped being able to sleep. I watched the clock tick toward midnight, toward my birthday, toward the first day of the rest of my life. March 15, 1970, 12:01 a.m. I was 18 years old, and I was done being afraid. Mr. Pemberton had instructed me to come to his office first thing in the morning, so at 7 a.m. I walked out of Golden Dragon's storage room, showered in the employee bathroom, and put on the one decent outfit I owned, slacks and a button-down shirt I'd been saving for this moment. The morning was clear and cold. The kind of March day where you could feel spring waiting behind winter's last gasp. I walked through downtown Richmond with my head up for the first time in years, and I swear the city looked different. Or maybe I looked different. I wasn't a scared kid anymore. I was a man, damaged and broke and still fighting, but a man nonetheless. When I reached Mr. Pemberton's office at 9 a.m. sharp, he was already there with 3 other people. Dr. Morrison, a court stenographer, and a man I didn't recognize who turned out to be an investigator from the Virginia Attorney General's office. "We've been busy," Mr. Pemberton said, spreading documents across the conference table. "Very busy." What I saw made me grip the edge of the table. Bank records, forged signatures, rental agreements showing Morris had collected over $10,000 in unreported rent, the fraudulent sale of the Westwood house, even evidence he'd sold my father's tools to a pawn shop for $800 and kept the money. "This isn't just civil fraud," the investigator said. "This is criminal embezzlement, possibly racketeering." At 10 a.m., we filed everything. Mr. Pemberton walked into the circuit court of the city of Richmond and submitted a petition for full accounting of the trust, removal of Morris as trustee, and criminal charges. By noon, the judge, a different judge, not Morris's poker buddy, had issued an emergency order freezing all accounts associated with the trust and demanding Morris appear in court in 7 days. Mr. Pemberton called Morris's lawyer personally to deliver the news. I wasn't there for that call, but Mr. Pemberton told me later that Morris's lawyer had gone silent for a full minute before saying, "I'll need to discuss this with my client." By 2 p.m., word had spread. The black community in Richmond was small enough that news traveled fast, and the story of Jerome Williams's orphan son finally fighting back against his corrupt uncle hit like wildfire. People I didn't even know were calling Mr. Pemberton's office with information. Neighbors who'd seen Morris loading tools out of the Westwood house, church members who remembered the funeral and wondered where all the life insurance money had gone. Even Judge Baxter's secretary, who anonymously sent records showing the judge had signed off on the guardianship extension without a proper hearing. The wall Morris had built through years of lies was crumbling, and he knew it. At 4 p.m., he called me. I don't know how he got the restaurant's number, but the phone rang and Mr. Chin handed it to me, his face concerned. Marcus? Morris's voice came through, and he sounded different. Smaller. Desperate. Marcus, we need to talk. I met him at Monroe Park at 6 p.m. I know it was stupid, possibly dangerous, but I needed to see his face. Needed to hear what he'd say now that everything was exposed. He was sitting on a bench near the fountain, and he'd aged since I'd last seen him. His face was drawn, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking slightly. When I sat down next to him, keeping a careful distance, he didn't look at me at first, just stared at the fountain. "You've destroyed me," he said quietly. "Do you understand that? You've destroyed my family." I felt anger rise in my throat like bile. "I destroyed you? You stole from me for 9 years. You beat me. You kicked me out. You tried to have me declared incompetent so you could keep stealing, and you think I'm the one who destroyed you?" He finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. That money, I needed it. The business was failing. We had debts. Claudette's mother was sick. "Stop," I cut him off. "Just stop. You could have asked me. When I was old enough, you could have explained, could have asked for help, but you didn't. You lied. You stole. You made me think I was worthless while you spent my inheritance on cars and clothes and God knows what else." A tear ran down his face, actual tears. "Your father, Jerome, was always the good one. Always successful, always loved. I was the screw-up brother. When he died, when you came to us, it felt like he was still winning, even from the grave. That money was supposed to be my chance, my turn." I sat there listening to him justify 9 years of abuse with jealousy and self-pity, and I felt something unexpected. Not rage, but pity. He was pathetic. A small, broken man who'd spent his life resenting his brother instead of becoming his own person. Who'd stolen from an orphan child because he couldn't stand his own failures. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Forgiveness? You want me to tell the court this was all a misunderstanding?" Morris nodded eagerly. "Yes, Marcus, if you drop the charges, if we settle this privately, I'll pay you back. Whatever I can." "You don't have anything left to pay back with," I said. "You spent it all." He grabbed my arm. I flinched but didn't pull away. "Please. They're talking about prison, 10 years, maybe more. Claudette will lose the house. Dwayne and Sheila will have nothing." I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. Like I had nothing when I was sleeping in parks? Like I had nothing when I was washing dishes at midnight to survive? Like I had nothing when your son and his friend beat me up and stole my paycheck? I pulled my arm free. "No, Morris. You made your choices. Now you live with them." I stood up. "The hearing's in 7 days. Show up or don't. But you're going to answer for what you did. To me. To my parents' memory. To everything." I walked away from him, and I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard him crying, loud, ugly sobs. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like the end of something that had been dead for a long time. The week before the hearing was chaos. Mr. Pemberton's office was flooded with calls, reporters wanting the story, lawyers offering to help pro bono, community leaders demanding justice. The Richmond Afro-American newspaper ran a front-page story, "Local Youth Fights for Stolen Inheritance." My face was in the paper, and suddenly everyone knew my story. Teachers at school approached me with apologies for not seeing, not helping. Mr. Patterson hugged me in the hallway, tears in his eyes. Lisa's family invited me to stay in their home. "No more storage rooms," Mrs. Chen said firmly. I moved my belongings into their guest room, and for the first time in 9 months, I slept in a real bed in a warm house where people wanted me there. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep despite the comfort. I lay awake thinking about my parents, about Daddy teaching me to hammer nails straight, and Mama correcting my piano fingering, thinking about the 10-year-old boy I'd been and the 18-year-old man I'd become. I'd survived. Against everything, I'd survived. Tomorrow in court, I'd find out if survival was enough. If justice was real or just another fairy tale adults told to make the world seem fair. At 2 a.m., I got up and wrote a letter to my younger self, the scared 10-year-old standing in that funeral home, touching his mother's cold hand. "It's going to be hell," I wrote, "but you're going to make it. You're stronger than you know. And on the other side of this darkness, there's light. I promise." I folded the letter and put it in my wallet next to the one I'd written to my parents. Then I went back to bed and slept. The courtroom was packed on March 22, 1970. Community members filled every seat, people standing in the back, reporters with notepads crowding the sides. Judge Rebecca Morrison, no relation to Dr. Morrison, presided, a black woman in her 60s who built a reputation for fairness and not tolerating nonsense. Morris sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer, looking small in his cheap suit. Claudette was in the gallery, her face tight with anger. Dwayne wasn't there, couldn't face it probably. Sheila sat next to her mother, crying quietly. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Mr. Pemberton presented everything methodically, professionally. The bank records, the forged signatures, the unreported rental income, the illegal sale of the house, the false expense reports. Witness after witness took the stand. Mr. Chin testified about hiring me, about my work ethic. Mr. Patterson testified about finding me bruised and terrified. Dr. Morrison testified about the psychological evaluation, confirming I was competent and had been all along. The investigator from the Attorney General's office testified about the scope of the fraud, over $65,000 stolen in total when you counted the house sale, the rental income, the tools, the life insurance money Morris had borrowed and never repaid. Morris's lawyer tried to argue extenuating circumstances, family hardship, misunderstandings. Judge Morrison listened without expression. Then she asked Morris directly, Mr. Williams, did you or did you not knowingly take money that belonged in trust to your nephew? Morris hesitated. His lawyer whispered something. Finally, quietly, I did. Judge Morrison's ruling came swift and hard. Morris was removed as trustee immediately. He was ordered to repay every dollar he'd stolen, $65,000 plus interest to be paid through wage garnishment and asset seizure for the rest of his life if necessary. Criminal charges would proceed separately, but the judge made it clear she was recommending prosecution. Mr. Williams, she said, looking at Morris with contempt, you were entrusted with the care of an orphan child and a sacred duty to preserve his inheritance. Instead, you exploited him, abused him, and systematically robbed him. This court finds your actions reprehensible and criminal. You will be held accountable. She turned to me. Mr. Marcus Williams, I want to commend you for your courage in coming forward and fighting for what's rightfully yours. The trust is hereby transferred to your direct control, with the remaining assets, approximately $15,000 after Mr. Pemberton's fees, available to you immediately. Additionally, the court is ordering the sale of Morris Williams's vehicle and other assets to begin restitution. $15,000, not the $70,000 or $80,000 my parents had left, but something, a starting point, a foundation. Morris stood up suddenly, his chair scraping across the floor. This isn't fair, he shouted. I raised him. I fed him. Bailiff, Judge Morrison said calmly, and two officers moved toward Morris. He sat down, his face crumbling. Claudette fled the courtroom. It was over. The aftermath unfolded over months. Morris was sentenced to 4 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. He served 2.5 with good behavior. Claudette divorced him while he was inside, took Sheila, and moved to North Carolina. Dwayne joined the Army, sent me a letter years later apologizing for everything. I never wrote back. Some wounds are too deep for words. The Westwood House's sale was reversed through legal proceedings, and I got the property back, though it needed repairs. I rented it out properly this time, using the income to pay for college. I graduated from Armstrong High School in June 1970. Barely, but I graduated. That fall, I started at Virginia State University on a combination of scholarships, Pell Grants, and my rental income. I studied social work, determined to keep the promise I'd made to Lisa to help other kids like me. I graduated in 1974, got my MSW in 1976, and spent the next 40 years working with foster children, orphans, and teens in crisis. I've helped hundreds of kids navigate the system, fight for their rights, avoid predators in their own families. I like to think I've made my parents proud. I know I've made younger Marcus proud, that scared boy who survived when survival seemed impossible. I'm 74 now, and there are things I understand about that time that I couldn't see then. Morris died in 2003, liver failure from drinking. I didn't go to the funeral. Claudette reached out once, tried to apologize, but some things can't be fixed with apologies. I've forgiven them in my own way, not for them, but for me. Carrying hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what they did was okay. The scars are still there. I have nightmares sometimes, wake up thinking I'm 17 and sleeping in that storage room. I struggle with trust, with letting people help me, with believing I deserve good things. Therapy helped. Took me years to start, but it helped. I married late at 38 to a woman named Angela who understood broken things because she'd been broken too. We had 2 daughters, raised them with so much love they sometimes roll their eyes at us. I made sure they knew their worth from day one, made sure they knew they were wanted, treasured, protected. I broke the cycle. That's my victory. Not the money I recovered or the justice I got, but the cycle I broke. Sometimes people ask me if it was worth it. The fight, the pain, the years of struggle. They ask if I wouldn't have been better off just letting it go, moving on, starting fresh without the trauma of confrontation. And I always tell them, hell yes, it was worth it. Not because of the money, though having resources helped. Not because of revenge, though seeing Morris held accountable mattered. It was worth it because I learned something essential. I was worth fighting for. That 10-year-old boy who lost his parents, that 17-year-old kid sleeping in alleys and washing dishes until his hands bled, he was worth fighting for. My parents' legacy was worth protecting. The truth was worth telling, even when it hurt. If you've ever been in a place where someone made you feel worthless, made you feel like you didn't deserve justice or dignity or love, I need you to hear this. They were lying. You are worth fighting for. Your story matters. Your pain is real, and you don't have to carry it alone. I thought I had time back then, time before I lost my parents, time before the world taught me how cruel it could be. Turns out time had me, but I used it to grow stronger, to survive, to become a man who helps others survive their own hells. That's what we do, those of us who've been through fire. We reach back and pull others through. We tell our stories so someone else knows they're not alone. We fight. And sometimes when we're lucky and the world shows mercy, we win. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if this story touched you, if you've survived your own Morris, your own hell, your own impossible situation, share it. Your testimony might save someone else. Peace doesn't come cheap, friends, but it comes. I promise you, it comes.